Everybody back from the Labor Day off time. If you had some time to relax, good for you. Glad to hear it. If you didn't, hopefully you'll have some coming up sometime soon. Maybe a chance to go out with the better half and do a little trip. I did that in Michigan. We got up to Lake Huron, which has been more often than not the summertime haunt, and just thoroughly enjoyed that time. Do you spend time with the better half and with your spouse communicating? But I don't mean like, hey, did you pay this bill? Did you pay that bill? That's important. But that's not intimate communication. What does that mean, intimate communication? Why is it lacking in some marriages and fruitful with others? Let's talk about it this morning with the good doctor, Dr. John Braccio. drjohnb.com, the place for the podcast. That's the website to go to at Regional Psychological Services of East Lansing. Good morning, sir, and welcome back.
Well, good morning to you, and I'm glad you had a good holiday, and so did we. So
good. That's great. Great to hear.
This topic here, intimate communication in marriages, it does require a willingness to become vulnerable to possible betrayal and or even indifference. And a lot of people, because of this, they don't really share how they really feel. They may get along, they may even have, on the surface, really have a successful marriage, but they don't really communicate deep inner feelings. And during this time of the COVID, this is a good time to really start working on sharing, really letting deep thoughts, deep feelings be shared, like people, if they're scared, if they're feeling depressed, if they're anxious, if they feel betrayal in the past, they don't feel trusting, whatever it might be, thoughts that a lot of people don't feel comfortable sharing. And it takes a risk to make yourself vulnerable, Dave, but in effective, good relationships, people really do share, and they really become one. They become a person by being able to really communicate. But it's very, very hard for people, and a lot of people have never learned how to do this. They were betrayed as children. They were betrayed in relationships, and maybe even by their spouse in the past, where deep feelings they've given have been shared with other people. But it's really worth working on, because the potential rewards of an intimate communication in a relationship will lead to a lot of wonderful things, including often very good physical aspects to a marriage, let alone just the merging of two people into one. So it's really worth the effort, and just so many people are fearful, or they just quit doing it. They get into the routine of life, so they just live together. They may love each other, but they don't really share and connect. And I think that's part of the reason we even have 50% of lack of success in marriages as a whole. People just don't really communicate feelings and become one.
Well, so what do you attribute that to? Like, where does it break to? I mean, I think there was an age and time, and maybe there always will be, where there's certain gender roles that would lead, in the past, that the male would say, I can't let my guard down, I must be strong, I'm the hunter, gatherer, protector, I cannot expose myself in that way, just because it wasn't part of the built-in social norm. But I imagine that has changed. But what would be a barrier to doing this? What do you see most often?
I think part of it is still in case. I think men as a whole do not tend to have the intense relationships that women have. I can even tell you, I tend to use the phone if I'm calling a friend to set up a time to get together, not to have a long talk on the phone. Not that I wouldn't do that sometimes, but I can say just personally, my wife, she can be on the phone with a friend for 2-3 hours and really talk about things. So that's one thing. I do think there are gender differences.
I'm with you on that, by the way. I'm with you on that. It shows the great difference, though, doesn't it?
It really does show a difference. My feeling is, though, that when people really do share feelings, they share defeats and victories openly. I mean, there's some things people may keep a little close to the vest, but I mean, as a whole, when people can really sit down and say, this is really a bad day. Okay, I'm really feeling bad. I just feel you're not connected to me. I feel you're really not aware of how I'm feeling. And then the person has to say, well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how you feel and try to communicate and try to share things. And this is hard for a lot of people. I see this in my work. I see it in people I talk to in life. And that's bad, because when people start going to other people to have to share these communications, this is what leads to affairs, breakup in relationships, or people just kind of live together. They become roommates. They may get along fine, and they may even be considered successful marriages, but they're not the type of relationships that people really share feelings. And it's really worth it. It's really worth working on. And I think that men as a whole, it's something that they may be doing better now, but it is something to be willing to really do, because we're not necessarily out gathering food and guarding the perimeter from the saber-toothed tiger or something. And a lot of times, women are working as much or more as men. So it isn't like it's because of a distribution of work or a difference in education. So just taking the risk, and I've always liked the old Pepsi ad about, go for the gusto. This goes back some years, but I always like that ad. I think that, that you go for the gusto. You go for the best in life. And if you're in a relationship and you're with someone you love and the person loves you, you have to take some risk, and each of you have to know you can trust each other. And that becomes a key thing, because if you have a spouse that goes and relays everything to his or her best friend or to the parent or someone else, then it's going to lead to the person not feeling comfortable sharing. So there has to be some ground rules and some agreement. But I've worked with various couples over the years that learned how to do this, wanted to do it, but didn't have the skills and weren't able to. So it is something you have to work on, and you have to really develop it. But the rewards are just amazing, because when the communication is really good, then everything else falls into place, because then you are going to have more physical intimacy because you're communicating. You're going to have more sharing in terms of traveling, doing things, just having a soulmate. Cicero's another you, in terms of a friend. So it's an exciting thing to aim for. And with people now being enclosed a lot of the time together, rather than fighting or finding things to have problems with, which unfortunately is happening with a lot of couples, this is the time to work at really better communication and really rushing forward into the sunset. I mean, to be dramatic, and really open up and have a great time. But someone has to start the ball rolling, and someone has to say, let's do this. Let's make an attempt. It may be awkward. It may be very difficult to do. It may be trying to use tools that you've never had and those you need to develop. But it can be pretty exciting when you see this happen with people. It is a wonderful transformation of just a relationship, and maybe even a relatively successful one, into a far more in-depth relationship with real deep communication and good communication.
And you've seen this with couples you've worked with, where they've taken it to another level, right?
Yeah, it's really exciting to watch. I mean, Dave, listen, when you have two people that are really in tune with life and really communicate, and really share, it's wonderful. It doesn't mean they don't have disagreements, like turning off the football game at a key moment. Okay, even though there might not be Big Ten football, but anyway, the main thing is they're really sharing, and if they have children, they enjoy them. They just haven't. You see it. You can see it with people. You can see a lot of couples that get along. They're proper. They're prim. They get together. They even lead a lifetime together.
Right.
But often they're in separate rooms, or they're just there's just lack. You can see it. There's that formality. Call it what you will, but when people are close, you see it, and it's a wonderful thing to aim for. And it's harder than it really sounds. You can just to say, well, intimate communication, okay. But a lot of people have been betrayed in the past. They have been in a situation where people have misused the information. Or when they have tried to share feelings, there's an indifference. Oh, no big deal. Just get over it and don't be so emotional. Don't.
Which can be, but for somebody trying to open up, that can be crushing.
Yes.
I mean, that could be, you think you're hearing words, but this was a moment. This was a key critical moment, that could be crushing to another person. That's the definite risk that you're taking when you make that step forward. Yeah.
And, a lot of, Dave, that happens all the time. I mean, unfortunately, people want to have that communication, and they're told, it's no big deal. Don't take it so seriously. Just blah, blah, blah. And that immediately throws ice-cold water on the person and the need for communication, and it can be hurtful. So this idea of trying to use active listening, trying to listen, this is how you feel. Well, tell me more. Let me understand more. It can really be exciting. It can really be a real adventure in life if someone is really willing to do it. But, some people, when they were growing up, their whole life they've been damaged emotionally in the sense that they don't share vulnerabilities. They feel they have to always be the stiff upper lip, the kind of the stereotypic Germanic person, that or the old Spartan from Greece. So we really do want to be working on communicating, sharing, and just being an open, loving relationship.
And let's not, there's a value to some of those traits you just mentioned there, but this would not be the moment for them. So let's be clear. There's a time in our life for stiff upper lip and for, getting on, but this would not be that moment. And recognizing the difference, especially with a spouse, and if you have any years involved in the relationship, this would be a good time to take advantage of those skills, whatever you've developed listening, right? To listen
that's really true. And you will find in a number of relationships that one of the two just doesn't share. The other one thinks they are sharing, and one really keeps things to themselves in a way that they're not satisfied, and they don't know if the other person can understand. They don't want to take the risk, or maybe they just want to make the other person happy or have the relationship just move along smoothly, and they're not willing to take the risk because they could have all these thoughts and ideas and dreams that they don't talk about. And it may surprise you, Dave. There's just a lot of couples and people that live together that there's so many aspects of each side of them that the other one doesn't know. And not that they're bad or anything. It's just they haven't done it. But it leads to one person being totally unfulfilled. It can be very unfulfilled. And, of course, it can relate to two. But you can have one who thinks things are fine and one who's really concerned. So there's always that need for mutual communication, mutual sharing, even sometimes taking a time out, sitting down and talking about the state of the relationship. In fact, there are people that do plan that. They'll do it once a year. They'll sit down and even less of that and just talk. So I look upon a good marriage, a good relationship as like a garden. You have to work on it. It may be beautiful on a given day, but then the wind comes through and the rains come through, like today, actually.
Yeah, like today, we're certainly seeing plenty of that. The Good Doctor here, the podcast always available, drjohnb.com. Dr. John Braccio, Senior Regional Psychological Services. Always good to talk to you, my friend.
Same to you, Dave. Have a good week, okay?
Back here shortly on the Morning Wake Up, 1320 WILS.